Good morning, church. Did everybody have a good Thanksgiving, maybe? Did you eat a lot of food? Did you eat a little bit too much? Good. This morning I'm preaching on gluttony. No, I'm just kidding. You can thank my mother for that joke. She gave me that a couple of weeks ago. I thought, oh, that's a good one. I'm going to keep that. No, I'm reminded as we come out of the holidays, for me, this is a really joyous time. I love getting to spend Thanksgiving with my family and Megan's family. They're both here. This is the first holiday in probably 4 or 5 years where they've lived here, and we've all lived close enough together that we could get together for the holidays. And we're looking forward into Christmas, and Megan and I were putting the Christmas tree up the other night, and we didn't finish, if you're curious about that kind of thing. But this is a joyous time for me, but it's not a joyous time for everybody. The holidays seem to have a way for some to remind you of things that you wish you had or that you lost or that were not going your way. They can seem hopeless. And I'm reminded of a friend that I used to work with. Now, some of you are going to like me less when I start this story, but we'll get through it, okay? I used to sell cars. Go ahead. Now that we've gotten through the hard part. But I worked with this guy, and he was a finance manager at the car dealership that I worked at, and he was having some trouble. And I'll spare some of the details with you here, but the long and short of it is he was coming home, and his wife decided she was done, and she was going to leave, and she was going to take the kids. And if he said anything about her taking the kids, then she was going to say that he abused her and abused the kids and was mean and all these kind of things, and that he didn't have any choice in the matter. He was just going to be stuck alone. And so he's hearing this as he's going into Christmas. And I remember seeing him before we had the day off and telling him, have a Merry Christmas. And he's like, oh, it'll be great. I'm excited to see my family a little bit. Okay, good. And then when we came back from that day off, I remember his office being empty and thinking that was strange. And so I asked the manager, say, hey, what happened to his name? And he said, oh, you didn't hear? I said, well, obviously not. If I'm asking you, why? What kind of question is that? And he said, no, he had committed suicide over Christmas. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, his wife was leaving and she was going to take the kids. And so they had dinner on Christmas Eve. And he tucked his kids into bed and he said, good night, I love you. You mean the world to me. I put him to sleep, and then he went out into the front yard, and they had a big tree, and I'll let you fill in the details there, but his kids found him the next morning when they got up for Christmas. Now, I know this is a really heavy start to this, but he felt hopeless. His kids were young. They were like 9 and 13, I think. And they had said in what he had wrote to them that he just felt hopeless, like there was no way out, there was nowhere to go. And so for that family, where I look at Christmas and I think about joy and happiness and getting together, not everybody has that same joyous hope to look forward to, and sometimes we feel hopeless. And so I want to talk about the hopeless case of the empty barrel. And we're going to look at 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 8 through 16. It says, then the word of the Lord came to him and said, go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I've directed a widow there to supply you with food. And so he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks, and he called to her and he asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I can have a drink? And she was going to get it, and he called out, and bring me please a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread. I have a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug, and I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son. That way we may eat it and die. And Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said, but first make a small loaf of bread for me and from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. And she went away and did as Elijah told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. And the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Pray with me this morning. Lord, I pray that your words come and your Spirit comes. I pray that you get the message across that you're trying to get across, both through us and in spite of us, Lord. And so in your great name and the power of the Spirit, we pray. Amen. Now, I tell you that sad story this morning to say that even when all seems hopeless and lost, it's not necessarily the case. Because we have a Lord who can take care of us. And this story of the prophet of Elijah and this woman kind of reminds me here. This woman was done. She was like, I'm out of food. I don't have anything to do. We're just going to bake this. We're going to eat this loaf of bread, and then that's it. We're going to sit in our home until it's over. And the story of the prophet of Elijah is a powerful account of God in action. We going to get a thrill a little bit when we hear about Elijah standing before King Ahab, the priests of Baal, the wayward people of Israel, how he prayed and the fire of God rained down from heaven. Just a couple events maybe to remind you of. On Mount Carmel, the nation of Israel had turned their backs on the Lord, and they followed the god Baal. And they worshipped, this was the god that was worshipped by Ahab's queen, Jezebel. And so on Mount Carmel, Elijah challenged 450 priests of Baal to a showdown. He said they would pray, and the God who answered would be the God of Israel. And the people agreed, and the king agreed, and the priests of Baal agreed, and so the showdown commenced. And the priests of Baal prayed all day, and nothing happened, and Baal didn't answer, and no fire fell. And the priests of Baal gave up in frustration. And one of my favorite parts of the story, Elijah's taunting them the whole time. Where's your God? Is he taking a nap? Is he using the bathroom? Did he have to go and pee, and that's why he can't send you any fire down? And so, in preparation for his part, Elijah was like, I'm not just going to call down fire. I'm going to do fire in the most amazing way. And that's because I'm going to have God do it when it's not possible. And so in preparation for his prayer, he gave a command, and they dug a trench around the altar, and they poured 12 barrels of water over the sacrifice and all the wood. And when this was done, Elijah stepped up and he prayed a short prayer, and then fire from God rained down on the mountain. And in 1 Kings chapter 18:38, the Bible says, Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and licked up all the water that was in the trench. And when the people of Israel saw this miracle, they fell on their faces and they said, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And so Elijah took the priests of Baal to the brook of Kishon and killed all 450 of them. Elijah's pretty cool. Now, I think you would agree that that is a pretty mighty display of power from God. Elijah was the conduit of that power. He was God's man doing God's work, and he was doing it in a big way. But that wasn't always the case. Elijah didn't just wake up on one morning and head up to the mountain and do what he did. He wound up on that mountain because he had been prepared through some hopeless situations. Again and again, God placed the prophet in circumstances that were beyond his power. When God called Elijah to stand in front of Ahab and pronounce a sentence of divine judgment on the nation of Israel, Elijah's message was that it would not rain until he said it would. And it didn't. God then sent Elijah to dwell beside an isolated stream in the wilderness. And at that stream, God fed Elijah every morning and every night with bread and meat carried to him on the wings of ravens. And then when the brook went dry, the lack of rain that Elijah had prophesied, right, caused the brook to go dry. And so God sent Elijah to a place called Zarephath to be fed in the home of a widow. And while he was there, God sent him a miraculous supply of food. And when he was there, the widow's son died, and God used Elijah to raise the dead back to life. He did all those things and more to prepare Elijah for the day when he would stand in the power of God and pray fire down from heaven. And see, when I think of these things, it stirs my heart. And I praise the Lord for what He did in the life of Elijah and how He trained him. And what I often don't think about is the widow who got caught up in Elijah's training. You see, just because God wanted to prepare Himself a prophet, this poverty-stricken widow found herself in a couple hopeless situations. And that's what we're really looking at today. We're looking at this hopeless case of an empty barrel. And I want you to see that God is able to do amazing and powerful things in our lives. And He can take what appears to be hopeless and manifest power into that situation. And I want you to know more than any of those things that there is hope for your hopeless case. And so let's consider the facts here of what's happening with this widow's life. Verse 10 introduces us to this poor widow. And she's the focus of the passage. Her description tells us how hopeless she is. Number one, it tells us a little bit about her place in life. One of the first things we learn about her is that she is a widow, and she lives in a place called Zarephath. And I know what you're thinking. You've said that about 6 times. But those two things tell us a lot about who this woman was. As a widow, she was in a difficult place at best. In society, in this part of the world, in this moment in time, women were largely dependent upon men to take care of them. And so, as a widow, she was going to have a hard time finding shelter, finding food, finding protection. And we find out in verse 12 that not only was she a widow, but she had a son. So she's not only responsible for her own care, but she's responsible for providing for this child. Now, in Israel, this would have been bad enough in that situation, but it gets a little bit worse because she was in Zarephath. And that would have made it just a little bit more tragic. You see, in Israel, in the law, God commanded His people to look after the poor, and for those with more to take care of those who had less. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide unto your brother, and to the poor, and to the needy in your land. But see, in Zarephath, they didn't have this connection to the law of God. The poor in most Gentile nations at the time were on their own, and that's where she was in Zarephath. She was on her own, she was a widow, and she had somebody else to take care of. We also learn the second thing about her is that she's got some problems. See, Elijah asks for a morsel of bread. He's not asking for a loaf. He's not asking for a sandwich. He's asking for just a small piece of bread. And the widow replies that she has a handful of meal in a barrel and a little oil in a cruse. And outside that moment in time, she's gathering 2 sticks, and she's going to take those sticks. She's going to use them to light a little fire and cook one final meal for her and her son, because it's hopeless. What hope does she have? They might as well eat this bread and then just sit down and die. There's no way out. And that's her plan. That's the third thing we learn. She's going to go in and dress it so that they can eat it and they can die. That's the end of the line. There's nothing left for her. Death is the only ending she can see because she has no hope. There's no hope to come out of it. There's no hope to make it through. And this woman is ready to embrace death for herself and her son because there's no other alternative. And that's about as hopeless as it can get. Now, most of us have not faced a situation quite like this. But we experience circumstances that cause us to be hopeless. It might be sickness in the body. It might be fracture in marriage. It might be financial crisis that grows worse. It might be the death of a loved one, and we can't see any possible way that any good could come out of it. It might be the case of an ever-deepening depression that fills the heart and the mind with hopelessness. It might be any of 10,000 other things, but the fact is there are times when life feels hopeless. And many people in the Bible feel hopeless. You can see it over and over again. You can see Moses when he fled from Pharaoh after killing an Egyptian. You can see it in Elijah when he fled from the wrath of Jezebel. You can see it in Jonah when he was in the belly of the fish. You can see it in disciples when they found themselves in the storm. You can see it in Jacob when he was told that Joseph was dead. You can see it in David when his enemies rose up against him, and on and on and on. But I think you get what I'm saying here. There are times when we are afraid. There are times when circumstances appear hopeless. There are times when there seems to be no way out, and the despair recorded by Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes is something most of us feel from time to time. Here's what Solomon says about hopelessness. Then I looked on all the works my hands had wrought, and all the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. Therefore I hated life, because the work that was wrought under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity and vexation of the spirit. For all his days are sorrows, and his travels grief. Yet his heart's taken not rest in the night. This is also vanity. For that which comes on the Son of Men befalls the beasts. Even as it falls on them, so does it fall on the other. And yea, all have one breath, and man has no preeminence above beast, for all is vanity. To bring that into modern words, it doesn't seem to matter what I do, what I make, what I build, what I cook, where I go. It all just seems like a waste of time. And maybe you've been there, and maybe you feel that way now, but there is hope in your hopeless case. We can see a little bit farther that in spite of this woman's condition, God is going to work in this widow to bring her to a place of faith in Him and in His power. And there's an unusual relationship here. Again, verse 9 tells us she's a widow in Zarephath. And those of you who may be biblical scholars who have studied quite a bit may recognize that Zarephath was the home of Queen Jezebel. It was a Gentile town filled with worshipers of the fertility god Baal. And God chose to send His prophet to this pagan town, the hometown of the woman who was trying to kill him. And Ahab was looking for him because Ahab wanted to kill him. And so God sent Elijah to the one place that somebody might think to look for him at. That makes total sense, right? And this widow that we read about is trapped in sin. She's lost without hope. She's lost with no way of salvation. But God, in His grace, speaks to this woman's heart and reveals Himself to her to take care of this prophet. And many, many years later, Jesus refers to this woman as an example of great faith in God. Luke 4:25 and 26. And no Jew in Israel would have given this woman the time of day, but God extended His grace to her. It's an unusual relationship. God finds the clay for His wheel in unusual places. He takes the things that nobody else wants, and He makes something glorious out of them. That's what He did with this widow, and that's what He's done with people like us. And so I praise His name for saving grace and for His loving the lost and the sinners, because this woman is not the clear choice, and neither are we. But God can use us in spite of us. And He gives her an untroubled request. See, when the brook dries up, Elijah leaves the wilderness to go to Zarephath, and he travels under the promise that God has already gone ahead of him. Because we read it, He said, commanded a widow woman there to sustain you. And so when Elijah arrives, what does he find? He finds a widow gathering sticks. And so he asked her for a drink of water. Then he asked her for a morsel of bread. And then she tells him her tale of woe. She tells him of the poverty. She tells him of her plan to cook what little food she has and die. And we presume that's by starvation, which I can only imagine, as you can probably imagine, to be a terrible, terrible death. And so Elijah hears all of this, and his response is strange. He doesn't offer to console her. He does. It's going to be okay. He doesn't say any of that. He just says, "Go ahead and just give me what you got first." It's a little bit weird, right? If somebody came to you and told you this big long sob story, they're going to cook a loaf of bread and just sit down to die, your first reaction is probably not going to be that, I get it, that sounds rough. Could you cook it for me first? Because if you're going to die, I just want to make sure that I get some. It's just a little bit weird. He says, give me what you have left, and then after I have eaten, fix food for you and your son. And surely she knows that she only has enough for the two of them, right? She only has enough for a small cake for her and her son. Now, Elijah knows that God has already promised this to happen. So Elijah is not concerned about this at all. And so he's able to preface his request with a little bit of fear not. He tells her that God's going to honor her obedient sacrifice by providing for both of them and for him in a miraculous way, because God had already been there and told this widow that the man of God was coming. He told her that she was going to feed the prophet when he came, and she didn't know how she was going to do that. She was terrified. But when Elijah shows up and makes his request, she allowed her fear to show. She expressed her doubts. And Elijah knows that God's going to keep his word, and so he encourages her, put away your fear and trust God. Elijah didn't know how God was going to feed him, but he knew God was as good as his word said he was. Elijah knew the rain stopped because he prayed and asked God to stop it. Elijah knew God had promised to feed him by the brook, and he was fed by the brook. So far, God's kept his word to Elijah. So he has nothing to doubt, but this woman, she's not seen any of this. She's not participated in any of it. All we know is that this widow faced this command with a great fear. She has not seen God work like Elijah has seen God work, but Elijah is assuring her that it's going to be fine. That gives us a little bit of an uneasy response. Verse 15 tells us that the widow did as she was commanded to. She went to the place and cooked the bread, took those 2 sticks and the meal and the oil, and she prepared a meal for Elijah. And she presented this present to the Lord. Now, that's faith, if I've ever seen it. This woman is ready to die, and I wonder if she was a little bit afraid as she watched Elijah eat the very last bit of food that she had. And I wonder if there's a last meal for us now that I've cooked this for him. But regardless of her fears, regardless of her doubts, regardless of anything she might have been worried about, she obeyed God's command. And she did as God requested, and her faith, I would argue, is greater than the faith of Elijah. He's seen it all. She has seen nothing. Jesus says if you have faith as the grain of a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, jump, and it'll jump. I'm paraphrasing that bit a little bit, but you get the idea. If you say it, nothing will be impossible to you if you have faith as small as a mustard seed. And I don't know what kind of impossible situation that you are facing, and I don't know what you will be called to face before leaving the world. I don't know what you're going to have to go through, but I do know that God can be trusted regardless of what comes your way. And if like this widow, you come into a relationship with God, you have His promise that He's going to take care of you and get you through it. 2 Corinthians, He promises that He will give us grace for everything that comes our way. Matthew promises that He meets every need that arises in life. Hebrews promises that He will walk with you every step of the way. Isaiah says that He will see you safely through the dangers that come against you. Deuteronomy says He will carry you when you can no longer walk. And Romans tells us that He will use every pain and problem and pit of life to help develop you and make you more like Jesus. Those promises, those thousands and thousands more besides, are given to the people of God. And our duty is to not try to solve every puzzle in life. Our duty is to not plan the path so that it runs smoothly. Our duty is only to trust in the Lord that He will keep His promises. And if we can do that, we can face the hopeless situations in our lives because God reigns. So they're in a hopeless predicament. The woman offers a humble present and receives heavenly provision. You see, the woman obeyed God and God honored His promise. God told Elijah they would be fed, and they were. Now, I don't know how it all worked, but I know that after this widow fed Elijah, she went back and prepared a meal for herself and her son. Now, I know that had to be fearful because if she took the last scoop of meal and the last drops of oil out of this barrel, put the lid, put them back on the shelf, she goes and gives him his bread and she comes back. You know what she's thinking when she goes to open that jar. I don't know why I'm looking. This is empty. But still yet she opened it as she approached that meal barrel and that little bottle of oil. And she knew that she had just used all she had to feed this prophet. And yet when she reached into the barrel, the meal was there. And when she tipped that oil bottle over, more oil poured out. And not just for 1 day or 2 days or a month, but for 3 straight years, every time she pulled meal out of that barrel and tipped that oil over, there was plenty for the next time that she needed some. That is a miracle beyond what we can comprehend. Because I don't know how God did it, I just know that He did it. She would take some out, He would put more in. They never missed a meal. While other people around them starved to death because of famine, there was no food to eat because there was no rain. God took care of them in a hopeless situation. Remember where we are in this, right? Elijah told the king, it's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain. And 3 years go by and it doesn't rain. They're eating. And nobody else is. There's no rain to grow the crops. There's no water in the streams and the brook. Everybody around them is dying. And every time she takes out a scoop of flour, God puts another scoop back in. You see, serving God from an empty barrel does more to fill my barrel than trying to fill it myself. You see, if I start to forget about what I think I need and leave my care in the hands of God, He takes care of me. I don't spend all my time trying to solve my problems because I only make my problems worse. I'm terrible at solving my own problems. My duty is to faithfully serve Him and rest assured that He's going to take care of the rest. My 2 sticks and my meal and my oil accomplishes very little. But God can do wonders with what I leave in His care. The widow had planned to use those sticks to prepare a meal for her family and die. And in the end, she used those 2 sticks to feed God's prophet. And she put those 2 sticks in the hands of God. And He didn't just supply one meal. He supplied thousands of meals. 3 people eating 3 meals a day would be over 3,200 meals in 3 years' time. That's a miracle of multiplication if you're bad at math. Okay? Here's the point. 2 sticks in the widow's hands does very little. What fire could you build with 2 sticks? Those of you that have been camping are thinking 2 sticks doesn't get me a very long way. What could you have done? What meals could you have made with just a scoop of flour? But if you put 2 sticks into the hand of God, He can use them to save the world. Some of you might have pictured a cross just then. You got it. The rest of you need to read your Bible more. Now, what you have to do for this is to let go of your sticks. Let go of your meal. Let go of your oil. And like this widow, you've got to put them in the hand of God. It says, call unto me and I will answer you, and I will show you great and mighty things which you know not. You don't get to know what's on that other side until it's time for you to know. 2 sticks aren't much, but in the hand of God, they're plenty. All David had was a sling and a shepherd's staff and a few stones. But in the hands of God, he killed a giant. All Moses had was a shepherd's staff, but in the hand of God it parted the sea. The little boy only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, but in the hands of God it fed a multitude. All the woman had was 2 sticks, but in the hand of God it fed her family for 3 years. God doesn't need a lot to work with. In creation, God took nothing and made everything. All He is looking for is the faith of us to put it into His hands. There's a man called Chaplain Robinson, and his name has been lost to us in history. But he tells a story that took place in 1949. His father was coming home from World War II, and on every highway at the time you could see soldiers returning from World War II. And they were in their uniform and they were just hitchhiking home. That was the custom at the time, right? They didn't have Uber and cell phones to get around. And so this thrill of reunion with his family is overshadowed because his grandmother is sick and she needs a kidney in the hospital. And Robinson's father knew she needed a blood transfusion immediately, or she wouldn't make it through the night. And the problem is his grandmother's blood type was AB negative, very rare. And it was even harder to get back then because they didn't have air flights to ship the blood. They didn't have blood banks. And none of the family members had matching blood. And so the doctors had all but given up hope. And Robinson's father leaves the hospital in tears. He's going to go get the family members. They're going to pick them up. He's going to take them to the hospital so they can say goodbye one last time. And as Robinson's father was driving down the highway, he passed this soldier hitchhiking on the way home. Now, despite being deep in grief, there is no inclination to do a good deed at any moment, is there? I mean, you can imagine if you're picking your family up to go and say goodbye to your grandmother, the last thing you really want to think about is picking up the hitchhiker on the side of the road. But for whatever reason, he felt impressed to stop and pick this stranger up. Now, Robinson's father was upset, and so he never asked the soldier's name. But the soldier saw this man crying and asked him what was wrong. And so Robinson's father told him about his dying mother in the hospital, and that they couldn't give her a transfusion because nobody had AB negative blood, and that she would be dead in the morning. And it got very quiet. And this unidentified soldier sticks his hand out to Robinson's father with his hand upturned, holding his dog tags with his blood type engraved on them. AB negative. So the soldier tells Robinson's father, turn around and go to the hospital because I'll give her some blood. Robinson's grandmother lived until 1996. 47 more years. And to this day, nobody knows who that soldier was. And they're convinced that that was just an angel. You see, we don't know how God is going to keep His promises. We don't know how He's going to manifest His power. All we know is that somebody put their 2 sticks into the hand of God, and when He did, everything changed. So what do you need to put into God's hands today? Is it an impossible situation? Is it lost family members? Is it sickness? Is it need? Is it sin? Is it your soul? Whatever it is, like these 2 sticks, in your hands they won't amount to much. But in God's hands they become a miracle as He manifests His power to solve your hopeless case. Whatever your hopeless case is. If you all want to come up here. We're going to do communion today. And before we do, I just want to extend the offer to you to put whatever your sticks are into God's hands. I know there's members of the prayer team as they come and play a little bit, I just want to invite you to the altar to put your sticks in God's hands. And then after that, Brother Paul, if you'll come and lead us in communion. But God can do things. God can take the weakness that you have, the power that you don't have, and turn small things into big things. And so I invite you now to come and put those things into God's hands. Come to the altar and share those things and pray them, and then I'll let you come up.
All right. All right. If anybody does not have the elements, if you would just stick your hand up in the air. The Parkers are here. They will make sure you have the elements for communion. And I know we just finished Thanksgiving, one of the my favorite holiday. I love it because all they expect you to do is eat. And maybe take a nap afterwards. You know, it doesn't get much better. And to follow somebody so powerful in what they delivered is always a difficult thing. I promised Pastor that I would go over communion. And there is a disclosure in the reading of this, and I want to bring that out very strong because it is a powerful thing. But more so than that, you know, so many times we concentrate on the disclosures, the bad things, the things that could happen. As Dylan just brought out, you know, when we do that, we take God out of the element. This was written by the Apostle Paul. For I have received from the Lord, which also I deliver unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, broke it, and said, This is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. And after the same manner he took the cup, and when he had supped, saying, This cup is a New Testament in my blood. This do as often as you drink it, remember of me. Do it in remembrance of me. You know, we skip over that New Testament. It's a new covenant. Everything that Dylan brought out was so powerful. But everything was done was according to the Old Testament, the Old Covenant. The promise God gave men of God back then. Everything Jesus did, he did according to the Old Testament, the Old Covenant. Verse 26 says, For as often as ye eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show the Lord's death till he comes. Wherefore, whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. But let every man examine himself. There's several places in the Bible where it says, judge not. But if you judge yourself, examine himself. And so let him eat and drink of the cup. For he that eateth and drinketh unworthily, eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. And for this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. You know, there's so many places in the Bible where it covers this stuff. You know, you grow up with things that you hear all the time. I grew up with the saying, what goes around comes around. I didn't realize that was Galatians 6 and 7. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, so shall he reap. You know, there are so many things that we do without giving thought of the significance of what it really is. And when you realize what was just brought to you is so powerful and so true. Ephesians 3:20 says, "Now unto him who is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all we could ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." Today, above all else, as you partake of the body of Christ, you must realize that it is a symbol. But as you partake of this, you're saying to God, I do receive what your Son did. I understand that it is a New Testament, it is a new covenant. And as long as I walk and stand on that New Testament and I stand on that new covenant, there's nothing God holds back from you. So, that in mind at this moment, take the bread and eat in remembrance of him. You will find that blood is such an important thing to God. It symbolizes so many things. The covenants that was created by God early on, it was a lamb's blood that was sacrificed. Then later on came a covenant of circumcision where a man's blood would flow. But the last and most great sacrifice, Christ himself allowed his blood to flow. Last chapter of Matthew, 28th chapter, as Jesus is ascending back up into heaven, he reminds us and says, all power is given unto me, and in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore. You will find that when he said that and did that, it wasn't a request. He was letting you know you are equipped. You have everything you need. Go forth and do the things that I have showed you to do. And be ready to receive the reward for it. As we partake of the cup, do that with a knowing that something's changing within you, that you have a blood-bought right to step into all that God promised. So do this in remembrance of him. Father God, I thank you. I truly thank you for the privilege of coming before such a great group of people in a place where your works goes on continuously by the hands of the people that are here. But Lord, I ask that today, with the word that was brought forth and the communion that we just now took, Lord, that you supply above, beyond whatever we've ever imagined, that you make your way very clear, and that we can step to the fullness of the things that you've called us to step to see your hand move and accomplish those things. I ask that in Jesus' name.